morning. Will the Infrastructure Management Committee meeting now come to order? I am Councilmember Ellie Cochran, the chair of this committee. And before we begin, please silence all cell phones or any type of noise-making devices. And the members that are here today, I'll start off from Mr. Carroll. Good morning, Mr. Carroll. Aloha. Chair Mateo. Good morning. Don Couch.
Good morning, Chair.
And Vice Chair Pontanilla.
Good morning.
Good morning. And from administration, we have Director David Good of Public Works. Good morning, Director. Also, Michael Hopper, Deputy Corporation Counsel. Good morning, Chair. Good morning. And for staff, we have Analyst Scott Jensen. Good morning, Scott. And also Committee Secretary Yvette Boutellier. I also have quite a few resource personnel here today, which has to do with our one item on our agenda. And we have Sandy McGinnis of NPAC, which is Nutrition and Physical Activity Coalition Coordinator. Chris Hart from Chris Hart and Partners, who is part of the NPAC Built Environment Task Force. Also David Sarita, is it? Mr. Sarita from Chris Hart and Partners, and also Mike Summers from Planning Consultants Hawaii. Good morning, folks, and we'll have you down later. And I also want to introduce Vice Chair of the committee, Michael Victorino. Good morning, Mr. Victorino. At this point, members, I shall now open the floor for public testimony. And before that, let me set the parameters. The testifiers are able to testify on the item that we have listed on the agenda today, and also will be given 3 minutes with 1 minute to conclude. And when testifying, please state your name and any organizations or group you may be affiliated with. So members, at this point, without objection, I shall open the floor for public testimony.
No objection.
Thank you, members. And let's see, first person to testify this morning is Walter Inamoto.
Aloha and good morning, Committee Chair Cochran, Vice Chair Pontanilla. My name is Walter Inamoto, representing the Maui Bicycle Alliance. Here to testify on this Central Maui Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. I really want to applaud the hard work and effort, as well as acknowledge the Department of Health, who helped fund this study, Chris Hart and Partners, Sandra McGinnis with NPAC, and many other people in the community who worked to really identify priorities for bicycling and walking improvements in the central area, Kahului, Waikapu, and Wailuku. There was a lot of meetings and time and effort went in by various members of the public, myself and others in the bicycling and pedestrian side included. And we would really love to see some of these recommendations be put into future plans for implementation. If federal funding can be applied to help with the design and construction of these facilities, that would be great. And again, it's something that is kind of overlooked, I think. You know, other communities have had improvements in these areas, and I think it's time that we really need to look at the Central Valley where our core is and where a lot of us live and work, and see what kind of improvements we can make in these areas going into the future. I also wanted to announce, since the chair will indulge me, I wanted to announce that this may be the last time I will be before the County Council for bicycling related advocacy. I've decided after 21 and a half years to retire and hand the reins over to others who are maybe more younger and a little more energetic. And I wanted to thank all of you for your support over the years. And again, it's been a privilege and honor and an education working to help make Maui a little bit better for bicyclists for the last couple of decades. And I just wanted to make that announcement. It'll become effective this Wednesday. I'll be on Tom Blackburn's radio show this Wednesday morning, and I'll be notifying the rest of the bicycling community tomorrow. But since this would probably be my last time speaking before you, I did want to announce that. And again, share my thanks to all of you for, you know, your support over the years. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Inamoto. Yes, Mr. Victorino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Walter. First of all,
thank you for all the years. I mean, you've always been an advocate, but not just an advocate. You've been a mainstay. You've been the driving force behind of it, and and I hope what you're saying is in your capacity, not that you'll never come back to testify if needed.
Oh, no, you might see me again for different matters, but
Okay. We appreciate that. The other question I had for you in this whole study, what do you think the real strength of this study has brought forth in your mind? What does it grab you right away with?
the strength is that, the expertise that went into it. Alta Planning, who was a sub-consultant through Chris Hart Folks, is probably recognized as one of the best bicycling planning organizations or entities in the nation. And what they brought to the table was a lot of years of expertise specifically in bicycle facility planning. Dan Burden, who is also a nationally known walking and pedestrian advocate, his expertise was also part of this study, and what they bring to it is something that we would not have been exposed to otherwise. So I really would emphasize that their input was really critical to the quality of this report.
I've had the pleasure to sit and talk and also work with Mr. Burton in the past, so I can understand that. And unfortunately, the other group I have not. But I look forward to working with the chair and others to make this come to fruition. Problem is, the challenge is the word money, and we gotta go out look for it. But I mean, like anything else, this is the first step, Madam Chair, and we thank you for that. Thank you, Walter, and again, we'll still see you around. I know you may not be in the capacity you are now, but you'll still be around.
Oh, no,
Like
I'm not-
good news,
I'm not going
always
away.
back. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Victorino. Members, any further clarification? Yes, Mr. Pontanella.
Thank you. Just a fast comment about Mr. Enamora. I, worked with you in many projects, and we've got several projects done because of you. And good luck in your new capacity. I'm sure you're going to be here advocating for bikers. I'm sure of that. So, Walter, thank you.
Mahalo.
The community really appreciate what you did for the county of Maui. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pontanilla. Members, any further need for clarification from testifier? Seeing none, and I echo the sentiments of our fellow members, Walter. Thank you for your service and continued work, I'm sure. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you so much, Chair.
You're welcome. And next on the list to testify this morning is Jacob Verkerke.
Good morning, Chair Cochran, members of the committee. I'm here. My name is Jacob Verkerke. I'm testifying as an individual. I was fortunate and honored to be a member of the steering committee that worked on advising the consultants in the creation of this document. I was on that committee as a representative of the Waikapu community. I can tell you that the end result is something that the Waikapu community is very pleased with, that it reflects many of the values that the community has formulated in its statement of values. As a nowadays infrequent bicycle commuter myself, I'm very happy with the end result. It's a very well balanced document between the interest of pedestrians and bicyclists. And I hope that this committee and the council in general will accept its responsibility in the implementation of this document, just like you did with the resolution you passed for the real streets, open streets. Sorry, I forget the exact. You get my drift. You have a role to play in the implementation. In council projects and private projects that come before you, it's very important that you test the proposals against the concepts documented in this document. So we hope that you will accept that responsibility and carry this document with you wherever you go and whatever you do. I'm in wholehearted support of the document, and I appreciate the time that you will take this morning to get familiar with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verkerke. Members, any need for clarification from our testifier? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Verkerke,
Thank
for
you.
your time. And Mr. Hokama has joined the committee. Good morning, Mr. Hokama.
Chair, good morning.
And staff, did we have anyone else signed up? to testify? Members, seeing no one else wanting to testify, without objections, I shall now close the floor for public testimony.
No objections, Chair.
Thank you, members. This morning, we have one item on our agenda. It is IM 55, which relates to the Central Maui Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan for 2030. We appreciate the presence here today of representatives of the organizations that have collaborated on the plan, as well as the Department of Public Works. IM 55, Central Maui Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan for 2030. I transmitted this item to Council after I received the plan from NPAC. This plan was commissioned by the State of Hawaii, Department of Health, and Healthy Hawaii Initiative. This Central Maui plan is the result of a 2-year-long process that was facilitated by Chris Hart and partners, as well as Berkeley, California-based Alta Planning and Design. Today's presentation will familiarize us with the plan and will present us with the opportunity to discuss the policy-related decisions the Council may consider taking should the recommendations of the plan be implemented. Today, we have with us the coordinator of Nutrition and Physical Activity Coalition, NPAC, to make a PowerPoint presentation and respond to any questions the members may have. So at this point, members, I shall take a brief recess so we can go ahead and set the room up for the presentation by NPAC. We are now in recess. Will the Infrastructure Management Committee meeting now reconvene? Members, we now are going to be given a PowerPoint by NPAC. And who do we have? It looks like we have Chris Hart here. Mr. Hart, would you like to start your presentation, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Chair Cochran, and members of the Infrastructure Management Committee. I am going to just make some brief introductory remarks, and then the presentation, and then I would like to ask Sandra McGinnis, who is the coordinator of the NPAC, to come up and talk a little bit about the funding. And then I'm going to ask Mike Summers and David Sarita to actually share the PowerPoint presentation with you. Okay. My name is Chris Hart. I'm a landscape architect, and I really am pleased to be able to present to you this important Central Maui pedestrian and bicycle master plan. As a landscape architect in the community, our firm has completed several master plan studies over the years. Now, this is really important because Wailuku and Kahului are the main local resident urban communities on Maui. Wailuku and Kahului are the center of government, business, and transportation. And I believe it provides us a real opportunity to essentially understand that we're at a turning point in the challenge to restore balance to our automobile-centric transportation system. And it could happen right here in Central Maui. Now, to me, balance means restoring by adaptive reuse of existing streets and design of new streets the necessary infrastructure to accommodate safe pedestrian, bicycle, and other forms of non-motorized transportation. So this study is a very implementable study. Recently, we have made quite a bit of progress on Maui. We have the NPAC organization, Nutrition Physical Activities Coalition. We have Pioneering Healthier Communities. I happen to be able to be a board member of and chair of the Built Environment Committee for both groups. Don Couch is also a member of the board of Pioneering Healthier Communities. We have also the council passed a resolution on complete streets. We have basically the installation of the P.E.K.A. Street roundabout and a section of the bike path. Also, Mike White, as a member of this council, is interested in the adoption of the Upcountry Greenway Master Plan. Now, we have much more to do, but I believe this is a turning point, truly, in the challenge to restore balance to our automobile-centric transportation system. Now, this is not just for, basic beautification and enjoyment. There's a greater challenge out there in the context of creating a more healthy Maui community. And in the context of that, I encourage all of you to watch an HBO series called The Weight of a Nation, which talks about basically the problem of obesity in our community and other communities across our country. And this kind of initiative essentially will actually do a lot to bring about healthier lifestyles for our community. Now I would like to introduce Sandra and have her say a few words just about the funding.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Sandra McGinnis, coordinator of the Nutrition and Physical Activity Coalition, and did want to state that the Department of Health Healthy Hawaii Initiative is, as Committee Chair Cochran did state, was funded, did fund this project. And the reason health folks are becoming interested in the built environment is because of the obesity epidemic. We really have engineered physical activity out of our daily lives. So that's why the Health Department, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on the national level, and then foundations such as the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation also are investing a lot of funding and support for these types of initiatives. So I did want to acknowledge the Health Department. Thank you very much.
I will turn it over to Mike Summers and David Sarita.
Well, thank you very much, Committee Chair Cochran and Vice Chair Victorino, for allowing us to be here today. A number of people worked very, very hard on this plan over the last 2 years, and I think it's important that the County Council have the opportunity to familiarize themselves with the work. And as you know, my name is Mike Summers. I'm president of Planning Consultants Hawaii and was previously a senior associate with Chris Hart & Partners. And in June of 2009, Chris Hart & Partners and Alta Planning and Design were contracted by the State of Hawaii Department of Health Healthy Hawaii Initiative to prepare this non-motorized pedestrian and bicycle plan for Central Maui. And the funding for the project came from the Tobacco Settlement Special Fund. Now, the purpose of the project is really twofold. Obviously, the first purpose is to facilitate greater pedestrian and bicycle mobility within the study area. And second, the second objective for the project was to establish a model to support walking and biking throughout Maui. So this is a study, the methodology and the product which can be applied elsewhere. And there will be several long-term outcomes that would result from the implementation of this plan. First being the creation of a more livable central Maui. And this would result because of the changes to the built environment that would result from the plan's recommendations. And when you have a more walkable and bikeable community, obviously you increase access, especially for students and the elderly. You also reduce traffic congestion, decrease automobile dependence, and decrease the cost of living by getting people out of their cars, allowing them to walk and bike. They're not spending money on gas. Some folks might be able to get rid of their cars and lose the cost of insurance. So it's very important that we give people that opportunity. Secondly, by promoting biking and walking, we improve the health and well-being of our community. And this means that we give people more opportunity to engage in physical activity, which will result in more healthy body weights, reduction in chronic disease, improve anxiety and depression issues, and just make us overall a more healthy community. And finally, we facilitate environmental sustainability. We reduce greenhouse gases and the consumption of oil. We reduce impervious surfaces, decrease urban runoff, and increase shading and cooling of urban areas through streetscape beautification. Now, the team comprised Chris Hart & Partners, and it was mentioned Alta Planning and Design. Let me just quickly acknowledge the team: myself, David Sarita, Brett Hondorp of Alta Planning and Design, Sandra from NPAC, Heidi Smith from the State Department of Health. She was our client, of course. Lahua Choi from the UH Manoa Healthy Initiative Evaluation Team, and Constance Williams, who is a volunteer from UH Maui College. We also put together a very robust steering committee of state and county agencies, participation from UH Maui College, community organizations, bicycle and pedestrian advocates. And let me just say that the purpose of the steering committee was really threefold. The first purpose being that these folks offered a lot of expertise to the project, and they helped us do the plan drafting and make the recommendations. They also were important because they liaisoned with their own community representatives. So they established those relationships that are very important. And finally, just the relationship building that took place between the project team and the members themselves will help us implement the plan. And you can see that we had Sergeant Barry Aoki from the Police Department, Ferdinand Conjugal from the State Department of Transportation, Francine Ching from UH Maui College, Grant Chun from A&B Properties, Dave DeLeon from the Maui Realtors Association, Maui Bicycle Alliance, Walter Enomoto, Maui Bicycle Alliance, Robert Horcaggio, former chair of the Redevelopment Agency, John Min, Maui Economic Opportunity, Jocelyn Pereira, Wailuku Main Street, Joanne Shibuya, Department of Education, Maui District Office, Jacob Verkerke, Waikapu Community Association, Nali Yagan, County Department of Public Works, and David Yamashita from the Planning Department. Oops. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, okay, and to carry this project forward, we're actually forming a subcommittee comprised of some of the original steering committee members. Right now, we have commitments from Sergeant Barry Aoki, Dave DeLeon, Charlene Shibuya, Jacob Verkerke, David Yamashita, Sandra McGinnis, David, and myself. And we have some other folks that are pending. But essentially, the subcommittee's role will be to help facilitate the implementation of this plan, develop funding, advocate for the improvements, et cetera. Long-term funding for this project will be the result of hard work from the Department of Health, Healthy Hawaii Initiative, State Department of Transportation, funds with the tobacco settlement. Anyway, this, I think I touched on this before, but this was our funding source for the project. Now, the study area, as Chris had mentioned, is Central Maui. And Central Maui is, obviously our population and employment center. We have approximately 46,000 residents that live in Central Maui with about an equal number of jobs. Wailuku is our civic center, and our commercial and industrial center is in Kahului, along with our major airport and harbor. We have a number of intermediate, elementary, and high schools, so it's really kind of our locus of activity. And within Central Maui, we have a number of very prominent activity generators. And these are areas where we have a lot of internal traffic within the generator itself, and they draw people to and from. And so, for example, I'm not going to go over all these, but we have, of course, our Civic Center, our commercial core here in Wailuku, our schools, Baldwin High School, UH Maui College, Keopolani Park, the malls. There's a lot of stuff going on right here in Kahului and Wailuku. At the end of the day, we ended up, at the end of the project, we developed a Vision 2030 map and the accompanying plan. And so this is kind of the overall vision that we came up with, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but essentially, the idea is that we're going to become a world-class pedestrian and bicyclist community. And we're going to do that by developing pedestrian and bicycling districts, and we're going to enhance the routes between these different areas. In doing our work, the first step that we planners usually do in producing a product is to look at the existing conditions. And this means that we not only look at the physical conditions on the ground, the infrastructure, the conditions, the barriers in the case of non-motorized transportation, but we also talk to the people that are using those facilities. And so the project team did a survey of residents within the study area, and we also surveyed students, did an in-classroom survey of students at Baldwin High School, Maui Waiana, and Iao Intermediate. Now, I'm just going to quickly go over a few of the results. When asked the question, do you agree with the statement, my community is safe for pedestrian and bicycling trips, approximately 65% of those that responded either said they disagree that my community is safe, or they somewhat disagree. Okay, so what that means is that we have a lot of room for improvement. We only had 23, approximately 24% someone agreeing, and only 11% agreeing strongly that we're a bicycle and pedestrian-friendly community. And then when asked, well, what can be done to encourage you to bicycle more? It's interesting to note that the primary issue here is the development of more bike paths. And if you look down at number 3, it's more on-street bike lanes or routes. And then right in between the two, it's improved safety from cars. So we really got two things going on with respect to getting people on bicycles. It's increasing access to the facilities themselves, and it's creating the impression of safety so that people can feel comfortable riding their bicycles. And then, of course, providing bicycle storage, more education, et cetera, is also important. And then when asked the question, what prevents you from making pedestrian trips more often, the results are quite interesting as well. Number 1, we had lack of sidewalks, okay? And then if you go down further to like number 5, you have sidewalks in poor condition, okay? But then in between those, you've got not enough time, destinations are too far, those two. Now what that tells you is we have some issues with our built environment, just the settlement pattern itself. Okay, if people are feeling like they don't have enough time to walk or the destinations are too far, maybe that means that we need a little more concentration of density, we need a little more mixing of uses. And finally, ask the question, we had a whole number of questions, this is just a limited number of the questions we asked, but do you agree with the statement, Wailuku, Waikapu, and Kahului would be more livable if there was better walking and bicycling infrastructure? Now that's kind of a loaded question, but it is interesting to note that approximately 95% of the residents feel that yes, it would be more livable. And that's a pretty significant statement. Now I'm going to briefly take you through some of the existing conditions on our roadways, some of the barriers. These are just examples, a few kind of key highlights. We know that going into Wailuku is a very challenging experience for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And I think a lot of us, when we see this, we first of all, we give accolades to the biker because that's a pretty hardcore commute. I mean, I've done that a few times myself, and it makes you pretty nervous. But believe it or not, there are some solutions to this. For example, you can road diet, and then you can shave that bank back, and you could probably make that a pretty safe connection. Some of you may be familiar with this. I am, because I live in Wailuku and I often walk to Baldwin High School, as well as my son. And one of the preferred routes is basically hiking up next to the cemetery, up over the guardrail, and they use that little trail that you see. It's an informal connection, which is interesting, and you might be able to improve that and create a sense of not only greater safety, but also more, I guess, eyes on the path to make people feel safer. So that might be a little opportunity as well to facilitate pedestrian mobility. Vineyard Street, I walk Vineyard Street every single day to work, and it's obviously it's not a very pedestrian or bicycle-friendly street, and which is kind of unfortunate because it's really an important connector. And there are limited solutions here, but there are solutions. You can calm the traffic more, make the vehicles travel more safely, and you can get a much better result. Waiale Road, we talk about Waiale Road. It's a great opportunity. There's lots of right-of-way along Waiale Road, but you can see that at this particular point, it's a very dangerous condition. And there is a lot of right-of-way, so there are solutions. Here's a picture of Papa Avenue, and you've got kids walking in the middle of the street. Well, not in the middle of the street, but certainly in the street. Again, a lot of right-of-way, a lot of opportunity here to make this a very pedestrian and bicycle-friendly street. And here are some pictures of our existing infrastructure where we've made some progress, but there's room to improve. And so here on Papa Avenue, you can see a striped bike route. Now, we have actually a lot of striped bike lanes on our streets. So we're really doing quite well when it comes to striped bike lanes. But the reality is that you're really only going to get the pretty hardcore bicyclists that are going to feel comfortable riding on streets next to cars. So while this is great, there's obviously room for improvement. And as you can see from the photograph, we have a lot of right-of-way on Papa Avenue. Here's a condition along Eha Street where we have sidewalks on both sides, which is great. But the sidewalks are very poorly maintained and overgrown, so they're not terribly inviting. And in fact, they could be a safety hazard during the evenings. On Papa Avenue, we have quite a lot of sidewalks that are in place, but again, they're deteriorating, relatively poor condition. We're briefly going to talk a little bit about some good design principles. So from an urban design perspective, this is obviously it's at a fairly small scale, but there are some key things to note. One, the buildings are up close to the street, which creates interest. Secondly, you don't see big, huge parking lots along the street. You've got parking on street, and it's likely that the parking lots are in back of the buildings. And then you'll notice that the buildings themselves are wrapped with wide sidewalks. And on that one side of the building, we've got street trees that provide shade over the sidewalks, and they separate the pedestrians from the roadways. So we've got a pretty good pedestrian environment. Now, where the pedestrian interfaces with the automobile, there have been a number of mitigation measures to make that a safer environment. We've got a very high visibility crosswalk with a refuge island. We've got textured pavement to slow vehicles. We've got a curb and ramp and a corner radius that's been extended to create kind of a bulb out effect. We've got a median. So this is an environment where the transportation planners and the urban planners have spent a lot of time and energy to create a good pedestrian environment. And here's a picture, I believe, from Canada, where you have a really good kind of example of a pedestrian and bicycling kind of separated path. Obviously, this is a great opportunity for biking and walking. You've got landscaping to buffer the bicyclists from the street. If we had this kind of a condition in our right-of-ways in Kahului, I guarantee you we would see a lot of kids and families riding their bikes and walking. This is also a very appealing condition where you've got kind of the same treatment, only instead of the landscaping trip, you have textured paving and a rolled curb. And this is a downtown environment. Now, this is the ultimate in pedestrian mobility. This is probably a joint use path. Get from A to B here, and it's a very pleasant experience, and obviously it's very safe. Market Street before the Market Street Improvement Project. Market Street always had the elements for success from a building, from a planning perspective, a settlement pattern perspective. It always had the mix of uses, some density, and that was good. But what it lacked was traffic calming. It wasn't a very comfortable environment. It was hot. The sidewalks were in poor condition. And so after, what we have is we have a lot of what we saw in that prior slide. We have textured paving at the crosswalks. We have bulb outs and extensions. We've got street trees. We've got pedestrian amenities. So it's become a very conducive environment for walking and bicycling, and a pretty good model for Maui County. This is along Vivau Street, fronting the student dormitories. Our firm did the landscape architecture here, or our Chris Hart and Partners did. And as you can see, we've got another very conducive environment for walking and biking. And this whole corridor, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, has a tremendous amount of opportunity to become a very pedestrian-oriented environment. Okay, we're going to quickly kind of transition into the plan here. Now, when we formed our steering committee, one of the primary outputs that we wanted from the committee was to develop a vision statement. And so we actually spent 3 of our primary work sessions going through different statements to come up with one that we all liked. And so from this group, their statement of vision is essentially, and I'm just going to read it to you, the people who live, work, and play in Central Maui desire a community in which bicycling and walking for health, transportation, or enjoyment can be done safely and without physical barriers. And then to explain upon that, further, we desire a future where bicycling and walking and other non-motorized activities are accommodated in a safe, well-maintained, and easily accessible manner for the following reasons: promoting a healthier lifestyle, creating more livable communities, facilitating greater social, economic, and environmental sustainability. And the plan has 10 basic planning and design principles, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. The first being to promote more self-contained and compact mixed-use development. And the second being to provide pedestrian and vehicular connectivity between land uses. Third, incorporate traffic calming into roadway design, incorporate sidewalks along both sides of the street, provide safe pedestrian crossings, incorporate separated bike lanes and joint use paths wherever feasible. And I want to emphasize that if you separate the bikes from the bike lanes from the roadways themselves, you'll get a lot more use. Number 7, incorporate striped bike lanes when physical separation is not feasible. Incorporate transit infrastructure into roadway design. Incorporate canopy shade trees along neighborhood, arterial, and collector streets. And incorporate bicycle parking at key destinations and within activity nodes. Now the plan has 6 kind of key projects, and there are a number of sub-projects within these, but the first being to create this Wailuku pedestrian district. And this being that, to really essentially kind of expand the concept of the Market Street Improvement Project throughout Wailuku, linking the commercial core to the neighborhoods to the civic core. The second being the Waiale Road pedestrian and bike path. Now, Waiale, or the Waikapu community, is likely to experience quite a lot of growth over the next 15 to 20 years. And right now, that growth is not in place. So it would be very important to develop the vision for Waiale Road to be a separated pedestrian and bike path so that we can get people back and forth between those communities, in a safe manner. Third, creating a Kahului pedestrian district. And this is really that kind of core activity area that includes the old Kahului Shopping Center, which A&B plans to redevelop into the Kahului Town Center, that strip along Vavau Street to Maui or Queen Kahumanu Shopping Center, tying in with the university. That area has a great opportunity to really become a vibrant pedestrian district. To establish a Kahului bicycle district. Now, when we say a bicycle district, we're not ignoring pedestrians, but what we're saying is that in Kahului, the land uses are a little bit more segregated, a little bit more further apart. So walking is, it takes longer to walk from A to B. So, but what Kahului does have is it has flat topography, and you can ride almost anywhere in 5 minutes. And with those big right-of-ways, Kahului could be a world-class bicycling community. Kahului Beach Road Esplanade. Now the state DOT, and we've had communication with them, is planning on realigning Kahului Beach Road further Mauka. And essentially to create this esplanade along Kahului Beach Road would be a great project. And then finally, the low-hanging fruit is to maintain a comprehensive signage and striping program. And so this is essentially the vision map showing these different elements of the plan. I'm just going to quickly read of the Wailuku vision. This is not verbatim out of the plan, and then I'll go ahead and read the Kahului vision. But the Wailuku vision, by 2030, Wailuku will be a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly community. Walking and biking will be the primary mode for short commutes. Kids will walk to school because it's safe and housing is within close proximity. The residential communities of Maui, Lani, Kehalani, and Kehalani are connected to Wailuku by safe pedestrian and bicycle routes, and a separated bike and pedestrian path connects Waikapu and Maui, Lani, and Wailuku town. And so here, the plan has a number of recommendations that will help us get there. And I'm not going to go through all these, but it does include improvements to Market Street, High Street, Kaohu Street, We showed earlier an image of how kids are currently using that informal path to walk up to get to Baldwin High School. Well, this is an example of the stairs with a bicycle option where you could actually have stairs instead of the dirt path, and then you could have a little cycle track so you could push your bicycle up. So that would be a very innovative solution to help kids get to and from Baldwin High School. And the North Waiale Road, this is an example. It's a roadway schematic or a greenway schematic that shows you what a separated path might look like with 12 to 14 foot separated bike and pedestrian path. And that would be the Waiale Road connector. And you can see Waiale Road on the map there. And currently, it's like I said, it's a real opportunity because we don't have a lot of development that's ongoing right now in Waikapu. Now what we do have is we have that infill development, the development that's taking place between Waikapu and Kahului with the shopping centers. And it's very, very important that we get these designs in place now, because as that development comes in at these critical corners, they're not going to respect the vision. So that could throw it off. Now, Waiale Road right now has 100 feet of right-of-way. There's right-of-way along the entire stretch of roadway that ranges between 70 feet and 100 feet. So it would be very strategic to get in place a county plan for that roadway. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide here. And again, these are some various options where you can see, essentially this is a kind of a schematic that shows you at the far left the most exposed situations where you have bicyclists riding without even designated lanes on the street, but you do have a signage to make bicyclists aware. And at the far right, you've got a cycle track where the bicyclists are separated from the cars. And I can almost promise you on the left side, you might get 5% of the population riding. And on the far right side, you're going to get 40 or 50 or 60% of the population riding their bikes. Okay, now the vision for Kahului by 2030. And this is, I believe this is entirely realistic given the direction that the county's going right now. By 2030, Kahului will be a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly community. Walking and biking will be the primary mode for short commutes. Kids will walk and bike to school because it's safe and convenient. The rights-of-way within the Kahului Bicycle District accommodate generous separated shared-use pedestrian and bike paths, making Kahului a truly world-class bicyclist community. Furthermore, the Kahului Town Center has been developed into a mixed-use commercial and entertainment core that provides safe and convenient linkages to UH Maui College and the Kahului Harbor. The district rivals Wailuku Town for its pedestrian accessibility. Many residents enjoy walking and biking along the Kahului Beach Road Esplanade to watch the canoe races, docking of the cruise ships, and commercial freighters, or simply to go fishing and eat at one of the many roadside food stalls, or to play at Keopulani Park. And this is just a map from the plan which shows that area where you have these uses where A and B has plans to essentially develop a mixed-use town core, and there is a vision for creating a lot of pedestrian accessibility. And in this area, we would emphasize greater investment into pedestrian mobility and amenities, including decorative surfaces, street furniture, street trees, trash receptacles, bicycle parking, pedestrian lighting, traffic calming, raised crosswalks, and pedestrian crossings. And here are some imagery from Maui and from elsewhere of what that could look like. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Sarita.
Thank you, Mike. My name is David Sarita with Chris Hart and Partners, and I'd like to go through some of the more specifics in terms of the planned improvements from the document. To start with, Kahumanu Avenue is one of the key linkages, obviously, through Kahului, connecting Wailuku, Kahului, and you can see that it would be connecting the two core pedestrian areas. Kahumanu Avenue is fairly well represented in terms of bicycle lanes. It has 5-foot lanes on both sides for its entire length. This, in your report, I just wanted to mention how we organized the report. The first page has the route and has these numbers refer to where these photographs are from, and gives you a bit of a flavor for what the existing conditions are, a description of the existing conditions, and then some numbers in terms of the existing infrastructure, pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. And so Kahumanu has bike lanes along its entire length, as I said, and there's only a few pieces missing of sidewalk areas, so we would recommend linking those up, as well as providing some bicycle storage. Might be a good idea at the shopping center. It's one of the transit hubs for Kahului. And then another idea might be to add colored bike lanes at all the intersections. It's a very busy road, and so higher visibility in terms of painting the at the intersections, painting where the bicycle lanes occur might add some element of safety in those areas. Papa Avenue. I should mention that when Kahului was laid out, it's actually laid out fairly well in terms of connectivity. It's almost a grid. It's, you know, a slightly warped grid, and you know, if you think of it in terms of this being the center of a wheel, and these are spokes coming out of the wheel, you can see right away which spokes are going to be the most important, and Kamehameha Avenue being one of the key linkages. But in the moving laterally, Papa Avenue and Wakea are also two key corridors. So Papa Avenue, again, some of the existing infrastructure. The thing with Papa Avenue, like a lot of these right-of-ways, is that they have large 80-foot right-of-ways, and only about 32 feet of which is being utilized in terms of bicycle and vehicle traffic. So there's usually 24-foot paved with two 4-foot bike lanes on either side, which leaves about 48 feet left over, 8 feet of that being occupied by sidewalks on either side, where their sidewalks occurring. So you have about 20 feet of either side of the right-of-way to work with in terms of adding bicycle lane improvements. So there's quite a bit of right-of-way to work with in there. So for Papa Avenue being one of the key linkages, we would recommend that long-term separated bicycle lanes be put in on both sides of Papa Avenue. In the short term, there's obviously some sidewalks that are missing and some striping and designated bike lane areas that are missing on Papa Avenue right now. Again, going back to the continuum, with the least amount of intervention and the most amount of intervention being the safest on the right, Papa Avenue, again, you have the amount of right-of-way where you could have clearly separated areas, you know, really encouraging people to bicycle and feel safe with the high volumes of traffic along Papa. This is an interesting option because if you can envision the sidewalks that run along both sides of Papa Avenue. You could actually have the bike lane up against the sidewalk and then have parallel parking next to the travel lanes with a bit of separation here for car doors opening. So this would be an extremely safe condition. Cam Avenue, again, one of the main spokes coming out of the hub area, connecting Maui Lani residential areas to the core. Along Cam Ave, there's three areas where sidewalks would link up to make this contiguous sidewalk connection on both sides. There's some areas where there are additional bike lanes would actually connect up as well. The wide right-of-way going by the between Maui Parkway and Papa Avenue next that goes past the golf course has an opportunity to actually have more of a shared use path, completely separated. Again, there's quite a bit of width there to work with, and again, you could have separated bike lanes on both sides going the length of Kamehameha Avenue. This is what it might look like going by the golf course with multi-use two-directional path, and then again the idea of having your separated cycle track bike lane. Onehe'e Avenue, again another one of these spokes, not quite as prominent as Kamehameha Avenue, but again important linkage. And then you're connecting one of the schools up to the park, to the shopping mall. Right now there aren't any bicycle lane designations along this road, but it has the roadway width, paved width currently to simply stripe and designate it as such. And then again, adding sidewalks in front of the park might be a good idea to improve safety. You can see that there's sidewalks that run along both sides except for where the park is. And then adding some pedestrian crossing where the park is to connect to the residential area would also be a good recommendation. The Dairy Road area, Dairy Road is fairly challenging given its current condition where there's only, I think, on the previous slide, there was only 3% sidewalk coverage along Dairy Road. So there's only one piece of sidewalk existing, and it's not exactly a pedestrian-friendly environment. But I think in terms of cycling, you could promote Ho'okele as the linkage to get from along the highway over to Hana Highway. And certainly this is going to connect up eventually, so having bike lanes designated on Ho'okele is probably a key consideration. There's the separated bike lane along Mokulele Highway, which would connect up to Kahului with striping and bike lane designations along Pu'unene Avenue. And then again, there's just one piece missing along Heilani Highway where bike lanes would need to be designated in this location here. And then also adding park and ride bicycle storage here for where there's existing park and ride would be another recommended option. Dairy Road, if you wanted to do promote cycling on Dairy Road, you could do what was on the far left of that continuum with a simple signed and shared condition where you're raising awareness that there are cyclists on the road. Lono Avenue, again similar to Onohe'e in terms of its hierarchy. Lono Avenue does have contiguous sidewalk all the way along on one side. There's only a couple pieces where there's missing striping and designated bike lanes. Kahului Beach Road is a unique condition. It's quite unlike the other streets, whereas obviously there's high volume traffic, not exactly pedestrian oriented, but certainly in the future it could become a key commuter link between Kahului and Waihu area. And that you could promote that obviously by adding striping and signage for bikes. But also in the larger picture, you could promote the Kahului Harbor and Beach Road as an esplanade with harbor improvements, bringing vendors and parks and activity into that area. And certainly there's a lot of examples where cities have done that in the past they've converted industrial areas into pedestrian-friendly, vibrant core harbor amenities. Wakea Avenue, again, another key lateral access. This one is interesting because it marks more of the edge between the core of Kahului and the more residential areas. Wakea Avenue, again, fairly well represented in terms of sidewalks. There's only one piece missing here, and then bike lane designation out to Hana Highway. And again, long term, you could do the same thing that we were thinking of doing at Papa Avenue, creating clear separation of vehicle traffic and bicycle traffic, because you do have the right-of-way width. Kea Avenue does have a sidewalk its entire length. It's important because you're bringing a residential area over to a core element, which being the shopping center, and so simply having bike route designation along here could encourage bicycle traffic and make that feel like more of a safe passage. And so that's basically the recommendations in the plan. Overall, I think Kahului is fairly well representative in terms of crosswalks and controlled intersections. By doing a lot of these improvements, you would promote more connectivity and more access for pedestrians and cyclists. And at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Mike.
Well. So anyway, like I said, we're in the process of developing a subcommittee, and I might have Sandra talk a little bit about that through NPAC. And essentially, the subcommittee members comprise agency stakeholders, professional and community advocates. Sandra, would you like to talk just a little bit about that?
Thank you. The purpose of this plan being kind of adopted by the Nutrition and Physical Activity Coalition is because we really wanted to continue to advocate for some of these changes in Central Maui. So we decided to house this under our Built Environment Task Force, so it would have a subcommittee of its own. Some of the members you already saw listed, and we have been speaking with other folks. Walter Enomoto, even though he's going to be retiring, is considering staying on. He was a wonderful driving force, I think, as Councilmember Pontanilla mentioned. And we've been talking to other folks. The Wailuku Community Association is interested too, so we do have others that we want to involve, as well as a resident in Waikapu who actually bikes with her children to school every day. So that's what our plan is, and we really do want to see some of these changes being made in the future. Thank you.
I'd just like to close by saying thank you to all of you. And just to also say that in the context of infrastructure, for Maui County, really what we're talking about is basically trying to restore balance. We have had, an automobile-centric transportation system here on Maui, and Kahului is probably the best example of it. And I believe through a process of adaptive reuse, like restoring areas of or connectivity of sidewalks and essentially providing necessary infrastructure to accommodate safe pedestrian, bicycle, and other forms of non-motorized transportation, that this plan can be implemented. And it's not to say that it's going to be a super expensive process, but it is a process that needs to be initiated on piece by piece. And it can be something that will benefit the health, safety, and welfare of our important communities of Wailuku and Kahului. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you for the presentation. And members, at this point, we shall have a brief recess to reset the room to continue our meeting. We are now in recess. Reconvene the Infrastructure Management Committee meeting. Members, we had the presentation from the Chris Hart and Partners and NPAC. And at this point, I shall open the floor for questions and answers. Sandy or Chris, Mr. Summers, do you folks like to join us on the floor? And, okay. We'll get them situated here so they can help us clarify our presentation. Yeah, we can, I think, fit you here. Yes, Mr. Jensen? Okay. Okay.
Hey, I might try. Hello, Mr. Hart.
We can't really
Thank
do
you.
anything about
Good to see you, sir.
because then it goes back to the planning commission, but I can make it a separate.
And you'll have microphones in front of you too to speak into. Thank you. Okay. And morning, Sandy.
For what? No. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay. I think we're pretty situated now. I'll start with Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Victorino.
Thank you, and Chair, with your indulgence, I would like to allow Mr. Pantanilla first because he has, his area is one of the big corridors of all the discussion today, and Wailuku is the next, it's this whole central plan, but he has some questions. I would like to yield to him with your permission.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Mr. Pantanilla.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I like what I saw. And thank you, Ms. McGinnis, for, I really want to sit on one of those subcommittees because I think it's very important that, someone like myself, although I have till the end of the year, surely would like to ensure that, Kahului is well taken care of. Well, what caught my eye, very interesting, is Kahului Beach Road. What can be done for that one particular area. I like the idea of a broad walk. But some of these things, I'm sure you're working also with the State of Hawaii Department of Transportation. Anytime that we harden, the shoreline, we get all these issues. But, what you shown, as a possibility, it can showcase that one particular area for Kahului. The other thing is that when you look at, where we need to put in sidewalks, basically, the newer subdivision, you have curb and gutters, makes the landscape really, really nice between the road right away. But for the older section, I don't know how it's going to be planned if we decide to go curb and gutter, redo the things so that we take care of that 80-foot road right away and provide all these safety features. One of the biggest concerns that I have in Kahului is the number of cars that are parked within the road right away, and how do we address people from parking in those areas? Because I would surely bet that most of the people that park on the sidewalk or on the road right away are basically renting single rooms throughout Kahului. So that's one big issue that needs to be satisfied. The ground cover, I'd like to know what kind of grass it's being planned for, because Kahului, dry, barren, sandy soil. So once it's found out what type of ground cover that we're going to be using, sure like to know. I need to put some in my yard. Sandy soil. Let's see, curb and gutters, subcommittee. The overall presentation was really interesting in what can be done to improve and make pedestrian as well as bikeways an improvement within Kahului proper. So at this time, thank you for the presentation. I look forward to serving on one of the subcommittees, especially the one for Kahului. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Pantanilla. Mr. Hart or Ms.
Could
McGinnis?
I just comment on a couple, and maybe you had several comments that are worthy of comment, I believe, our response. One is the the comment about Kahului Harbor and the beach road. That of course would be a State Department of Transportation issue, but I think that the council being an advocate, for that type of an amenity would be a tremendous help in terms of funding. And there really should be a master plan, for the beach road. There's possibilities of basically narrowing the road paved area, in other words, and still provide safe automobile transportation, and to basically have a wider area along the ocean, and hopefully do the types of improvements that would not necessarily result in hardening. Other communities have done it, and of course it becomes a tremendous public amenity along the shoreline, and the opportunity of basically connecting the hotels and the harbor, the cruise ships, with the portion, the landfill area where recreational boating now takes place, and actually continuing down to Paklukalo, which was a highly intensified residential community. A lot of traffic generated out of there. The other thing about Kahului you talked about, I feel that there's interest on the part of the mayor. I know from our trip to Washington, when we were involved with the Pioneering Healthier Communities, to look at Kahului to basically raise the density so that there could be an opportunity for more parking on site, and basically looking at the rights of way. As David said, and Mike in the presentation, the rights of way of the streets in Kahului are significant. There can be a lot of opportunity for parking on street. I mean, it just needs to be designed and built that way. Typically, a lot of times in Kahului, there are no curbs, gutters. I mean, and really there's inefficient use of the overall right-of-way. I mean, there's sidewalks, but they're really, they're paved in such a way that there's no real containment of the grass, and over time, what happens is that the sidewalk gets lifted, and basically begins to deteriorate. So there's things that can be done in Kahului to, I think, intensify the density and to really upgrade the streets. And one of the things that, again, I just want to reiterate, a plan like this is not a matter of, a tremendous amount of capital improvement money. It can be done in smaller bites and phases, creating connectivity to schools and so on.
Thank you, Chris, for your comments. Yeah, and I look at the numbers on this one particular page, and you mentioned about around the boat harbor at one time. We had the homeless there, because it could be a great area for outdoor recreation, or as what the harbor's master plan was to have a area for cruise ships to park there. The other thing, and Public Works should know about this here. We do have a master plan for drainage improvements, and if we're going to put in new curbs and gutters, new sidewalks, then the ability for this county to set aside some funding to improve the drainage in Kahului. We all know that when it rains in Kahului, there's areas that get flooded quite often. So again, I look forward in working with a subcommittee in the future, because I like what I saw. I like what I saw. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pontanilla. Mr. Victorino.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Pontanilla. Your community has some unique and definite opportunities, but in our community, we're almost the exact opposite. Most of our roadways are old, too narrow, too small. Right now, we can accommodate even parking, let alone many of them being made one way, one side parking, no parking. So now to add bike lanes into many of these little communities is really going to exacerbate the problem. And I don't know how to solve that. Probably money and buying right-of-ways would be the areas to go. While it is a street that is traversed by a lot of the kids from Yale School, no sidewalks. And I've been working on that with Public Works. It's not an easy process. So these plans are great for my newer communities like Kehalani, Wailuku Country Estates, Kaimana, all these others. I think there we can do it. What do we do with the smaller communities? I should say the areas where they're old, camp style, narrow roads, and we're already with major issues on transportation, and you want to add this. How do we do this? I guess this would be the question that my community is going to be asking of you. How do we do these? On the main thoroughfares, no problem. This inner workings, and you know what I'm talking about, Chris and Sandy. You guys, Mike, you just said you walk and ride some of these very same streets. Vineyard, where are you going to go at Vineyard? Unless you start cracking into buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even have sidewalks right now. So what, I guess that, and Madam Chair, I don't want to get into a long dissertation, but I guess hopefully the plan, when it's being developed, will look favorably on how do we take care of these old neighborhoods, these older streets, which Wailuku is about 45–50% older streets. Market, you could do something with Market. Can we do the same thing with Church Street? It's one way, I don't know. But there is a lot of problems we face with that. But yet, I like the overall concept. I think it is time that we look at these walkable and bikeable communities. I have no problem with that. But how do we do it in many of my older areas? And we have that. And then you same that if you go up to Makawao and many other small, Paia. I mean, same thing. All the old camps, they weren't built for this. And they weren't even built for cars, actually, these roads. So how do you develop a plan? Sandy, you're chomping at the bit.
I am, because actually I can't speak to the technical side of that, but I
Yeah.
can speak from the community perspective and what NPAC has been doing over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So over those 4 years, we have had opportunities to bring consultants to Maui to kind of look at these communities, and the answer is there's not one solution for all of the towns. So each town has its unique characteristics, and we would honor that. We would want to work with community members, business owners, to establish the types of things they would like to see in their community, because we know that we cannot have everything for everybody in every town. I know the mayor even asked about equestrian trails, because that was really important in the upcountry area. So, we can't accommodate everybody everywhere. So that's one of the reasons we are bringing consultants to talk. And you had mentioned, having the opportunity to speak with Dan Burden, because they do these things internationally and can help us work through some of these challenges. But it is definitely not a cookie cutter type of thing.
Okay,
So,
thank
yeah,
you.
thank you.
And Mike, do you have any comment? Because I know you usually have something. If you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Yeah, no problem. Go
Well, I
ahead,
would say,
Mr. Summers.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the newer areas, especially given kind of the greater, I would say, enlightenment by not only developers but also by the county about complete streets and whatnot, not too worried about the newer areas, as you were just saying. But yeah, you're right. It's the older areas that you have to retrofit. And that's where the greatest challenge lies. But there are solutions. I mean, for example, on Vineyard Street, I would say that Vineyard Street's about 50% there. And the reason I say that is because you have the settlement pattern in Wailuku that makes it walkable. And that's why, for example, I mean, over the last 15 years, I've never had to drive to work, because it's a walkable community. Now, where we have the barriers, it's with the existing infrastructure and the old streets and their narrow right-of-ways. So we just have to get real creative, like Sandra was saying. It's community-specific, street-specific, and maybe on Vineyard it's just slowing those cars down so that cars and pedestrians can kind of commingle, and the cars are driving slower, and there's different things that you can do to accomplish that.
You make good points,
Thank you.
Mr. Summers. The real challenge with Vineyard is, especially the upper part of Vineyard, when you get cars parked on both sides of the street, one car can hardly get through, let alone people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, there is that dynamics on Vineyard. If you go from one end to the other, either you get right-of-ways, we make it one way, parking on one side, which then devastates the county and state workers who have to, and other private people that work on this area. So a lot of things have to be done in this area, and I didn't mean to get off on a tangent in that area. I like the plan, don't get me wrong, but I'm concerned that this is beautiful as it's laid out, especially for Kahului and other areas. Oh, that works well. But when you come to Wailuku and all these little,
It gets a little more complicated.
it gets a lot more complicated, and that's where my concern. And the other part is money. When you start looking right-of-ways and buying right-of-ways or getting right-of-ways, it can get very costly. But again, it's something futuristic. Thank you. I really do appreciate it, and something that I hope to work with you folks in the future also, just being here and whatever we can do to work together with the neighbors, making sure the community is
Yeah,
involved.
and I just wanted to quickly respond to a comment that Joseph Pontanella made about Kahului and the vehicles that are parking in the right-of-way.
Yes.
That's a very good example of where a situation where, in the implementation of this project, you'd really have to do outreach to the community and basically inform them of the vision and get them to buy into the vision and have solutions that are sensitive to that issue, because otherwise what would happen if you just came in with these improvements and all of a sudden folks are saying that maybe they're going to lose their parking, there would be a kind of a hostile reaction. And there are solutions to that. In fact, David touched on a solution, that would not only accommodate the automobiles, but would provide a sense of separation for the bicyclists from the traffic. So a lot of it's just good community outreach and creating that vision that people can feel comfortable with. So.
Thank you. I look
Thank
forward to that, and I think that's a real big piece of this whole plan is community outreach, community input, and coming up with what works for each community.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Victorino and Mr. Summers. Members further? Yes, Mr. Hokama?
I'd just like to reinforce, I think the word that I heard that I appreciate was enforcement. A lot of our times, let's face it, we got bad drivers on this island. Bad drivers. For people to try and overcut cars in front of a Wailuku L to save 3 seconds or something when they're offloading children, ridiculous. Okay, so I think part of the analysis of speed and distance of where people need to get to is a big factor. I think another one is that we're just bad drivers and very lazy. We're parking where we shouldn't be parking. They showed Eha Street. Go down there, when you hit the multifamily area, the whole bike path is blocked because you got cars encroaching the active right side lanes. So where does active traffic vehicles go besides the pedestrian and the bicyclist? Okay. So I think the department needs to work with us and police and say, should we now make very strong non-parking on collector roads? You park, you can get towed. I think that bicyclists need to pay a hell of a lot more than they're doing right now for bicycle tags. There's going to be a price to pay. And they want it, they better be willing to pay for it, because I cannot see tobacco money paying for all of these improvements. There's going to be property taxes, it's going to be automobile fees, it's going to be bicycle fees. And who knows what we may charge a pedestrian down the road. Somebody's got to pay the bill. But I would say the first thing first is we just get back to straight enforcement and make sure that you parking illegally, you're going to get tagged, you're going to get towed. But we even block stop signs nowadays with people parking in front of stop signs because it's 10 feet closer to where they need to get to. So my part is I think immediately the departments can work on enforcement, and let's start painting those non-parking areas, and let's tagging, and let's go fight for our money from the state so we can use those non-contested fees for our programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hokama. Yes, Mr. Couch?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, everybody, for being here. As Mr. Hart said, I've worked on this through the Pioneering Healthy Communities Committee, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to ask Mr. Summers or Mr. Hart. You have the ideal parking where there's the lane of traffic, then parking cars, then a separation, and then bike paths, and then sidewalks. I actually saw that when walking through Washington, D.C. It looked very safe for the bicyclists. Extremely safe because you got cars parking there. But the one thing I did notice is they had a lot of signage warning drivers and pedestrians that when you're going to pull into a driveway or into a side alley to look out for bikes, because now you have cars blocking the view of a bicyclist coming in. Have you talked to different localities that actually have that implemented to see what the vehicle bike collision rate is or vehicle pedestrian collision rate is on that versus any other design setup? Because that's the one thing I did notice. I said it looks really safe, except for when somebody wants to pull into a driveway.
That would be actually a really good question for our subconsultant that worked on this project, Alta Planning and Design, because they've done a lot of these plans, around the country and are familiar with the results of some of these, mitigation measures. So, I don't have the answer, but that's certainly a very good question, and we can ask our consultant and see if they might have a response.
Thank you, because that was when I saw it, I thought it was a great idea, but it really looked a little dangerous. Only, Manini times, but I don't know. That would be something I'd look at. The other issue, we talked about the parking on Kamehameha Avenue and how it's used probably for residents. And if you do that situation where you're talking about parallel parking. However, if you look at Kamehameha Avenue, a lot of those guys are certainly perpendicular parking, so there's more cars per lot on the right-of-way. And I don't know, department, if there's anything we can do about that right now, because as we know, those are people who live in those houses somehow, and I don't know what we can do about that, but you did mention that we should be very communicative with the residents there.
Mm-hmm.
But just remember that they're not parallel parking for the most part. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Pontano, they're more perpendicular parking on those areas, yeah?
One thing, this is Chris Hart, I think that we need to really study the rights-of-way in Kahului. David brought that up and as part of the presentation, and I think there's unique kinds of opportunities to provide for parking, and it may be that in some cases there could be some diagonal parking with a back-out lane or something like that, but I just think that there are creative approaches because of the fact that we do have such a wide right-of-way. And I totally subscribe and agree with Mike that, it's an issue that needs to have a lot of public participation. And I also feel that we should be, in the context of trying to increase the density in Kahului, it's a very inefficient density. And people do really want to be able to do infill, in other words, to expand the opportunities for their families. We need to come up with some creative zoning that would basically allow perhaps increased density on the site and maybe parking underneath, essentially the structure that gets built. Something that I know that our mayor is interested in trying to see some increased density in Kahului.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Yes, Mr.
And
Koch.
just, I think 2 follow-up questions. We talked about all this stuff, and it's all well and good, and Mr. Hokama talked about funding a little bit. Are there federal funds available for this kind of thing, other than the tobacco funds, to help us out?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of federal funds that are available, and the report has a chapter, an implementation chapter, where we identify all these federal funding sources. And just within, for example, within the district itself, we have a number of schools. I think I wouldn't want to guess exactly as to how many we have, but we have high schools and we have elementary schools and we have intermediate schools, and the Safe Routes to School fund is one key funding source that we should really be tying into, because this plan, addresses the larger region, but within the region we have these schools strategically located, and that would be a really good opportunity to tie into that funding with county funding and with state funding to implement some of these improvements. And then of course there are I think Chris talked about implementing the plan, incrementally. I think it's a little unrealistic to think that, we're going to see this thing happen overnight. I mean, it's really going to be a 20-year plan, and it starts with a good vision, and then, basically an approach of slow but steady implementation. And it might be that, some of these projects could happen quickly, like State DOT, if they want to shift Kaului Beach Road Mauka. That could be a really good opportunity to get some state funding. But, if we could come up with a dedicated funding source, just like we have with the Affordable Housing Fund or the Open Space Preservation Fund, where we have, some money just being dedicated to pedestrian and bicycling improvements. That would be, very helpful as well. But there are a lot of state funding sources and federal funding sources, and certainly the Safe Routes to School funding source is something that we should be pursuing.
Thank you, and that's one of the thoughts I had as far as how we were going to get that. And you mentioned, incrementally doing it, and while that sounds good, the issue that we'll get in our offices is, hey, they got it down there, how come I don't have it here? So we have to factor in that. And the last thing is, once we get it all in, all those nice trees, grass, curb gutter, sidewalk, we need to do maintenance. Right now, we have a really bad record on maintaining street trees and street right-of-way stuff. And I know it's in one department versus another. I guess we have to talk to our departments here as to, right now, who's responsible for maintaining street trees and things like that? And is there something we can do to solidify that or get everybody together? I guess Mr. Good would be the one to be able to answer that one.
Could I comment on that, Chris Hart? I've talked to Dave about it, and of course, he said it's the Parks Department, but but you know what? Can I just say that this is something that is important for our community going forward, and there are other progressive communities in the country that are doing it in Portland and Boulder, Colorado, just to name a couple, but other communities. And it's really important, not just for aesthetics, but it's for the health of our community. And I think that there are ways that we could consider, maybe there's a separate agency, or subgroup of public works, or that just basically maintains public streets and street trees and bike paths. Now, I know that the State Department of Transportation has specific people that just do that. And so I feel that we need to look at it creatively, but other communities do it, and somehow they meet their budgets, and you go to their communities, and you would say that it's very aesthetically pleasing. So as a landscape architect, I feel that somehow we can address the issue and come up with something that's workable for Maui County. I don't know what it is specifically. One point was I have heard people who, let's say, use the parks, and some people are very happy with the work that Kalima o Maui does. Now, I'm not saying that that's a solution, but there have to be creative ways, and not just say, well, it's the Parks Department or the Public Works Department, because they have so much to do. There's got to be some organization or part of a department that's dedicated to the purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I wanted to have Mr. Good, though, because he is currently our Public Works Director, and just to get comments from you towards Mr. Couch's question. Thank you, Mr. Good. And then I'll follow up with Mr. Pontanella.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Couch. And, I don't disagree with Mr. Hart's comments. I mean, the reality is that the Parks Department does maintain our trees, street trees. And so if there's a street tree issue, we call them immediately. And so they send out the arborist to checks, if we were to take out some roots because it's uplifting a sidewalk, they give us the direction on what to do with the tree. But maybe the question ought to be, the broader question we ought to have everybody here at the table. It's like, well, how much money is allocated to the Parks Department to trim trees? I know in my neighborhood, our community association trims the trees. I think they just wrote a letter to this parks a long time ago and said, we'd like to do it. They said, fine. And so I think it's every 2 years, our community association hires tree trimmer, and they come in and make the trees nice. And so it's pretty minimal work, and we just take care of it. But we have a lot of planted street trees, and we have a lot of ad hoc trees. Yeah. And I mean like eucalyptus trees, upcountry, ironwood trees in certain locations that make it more difficult. So it's really about priorities. Is this a community priority or not? And if we don't like the way it's being handled now, then we need to change the way we're doing things. And we'd be happy to be part of that discussion. I mean, ultimately, if Public Works has to do it, we need the resources. We need the men, we need the equipment, we need the expertise. We would need the appropriate changes. I'm not even sure, maybe the charter, but for sure the county codes that set forth those responsibilities.
Thank you, Director.
Just to follow up on his comment there, who takes care of, for instance, if you saw the one where it had parking, a barrier, it looked like a grassed barrier, then the bike lane and the sidewalk. If there's a grass median or barrier like that, who would be responsible for mowing that and keeping that in shape?
Yeah. Well, just for the record, let's not call it a barrier, because a barrier means like we can't get through it. Okay. It's really just like a landscaping strip, if you will. It's responsibility of the landowner fronting that landscaping strip. Unless I think the property has to be like over 10 or 15 acres, and then the county would take care of it on a county road.
Okay, so that has to be communicated if we start going to be putting that in there. The landowner has to know that they are responsible for maintenance of that area too. Thank you.
Thank you. And did you have a quick one, Mr. Pontanella? I know you always have quick ones, but I wanted to get to Chair Mateo and Mr. Carroll too. Okay. So if you got a quick one, then
I get three.
Go for the quick one.
Concerning Mr. Couch's, in regards to the maintenance of.
Chair Mateo, if you don't mind, can we? Okay, Mr. Pontanella.
Yeah, in regards to maintaining the front of their yard, I think we need to take a look at the ordinance in regards to having homeowners do that, because some homeowners will do it, some won't. Some homeowners will put landscaping, some won't. So if you needed to make it consistent, then I think, like you said, you probably going to need some resources to do that, and that way at least we know everything will be taken care of. The other way, depending on homeowners, I never did do anything to my front yard. I have soil that is higher than the sidewalk, not the sidewalk, but the driveway. I don't have heavy equipment to clear it out, to make it, so I can plant some grass. So it's something that we need to take a look at as far as the ordinance. So I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Couch's question regarding that. And the other thing is that I'm sure you already talked to the utility companies in regards to some of the underground facilities that we have throughout Kahului, because they share some of the responsibility because of, when they put in sidewalks and manholes, it becomes uneven after a while. So safety becomes an issue too. I don't know if you guys do any inspections, such as, sidewalks, going lower than the pool boxes or manholes themselves. So that's a big issue. So, Chairman, I still have more questions, but, I yield to Chairman Mateo.
Thank you, Mr. Pontanella. Yes, Mr. Mateo.
And I could have let him ask his questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. For me, it's kind of like about time we actually address, especially in the central area, yeah, because what's there today is definitely not appropriate, yeah. And it always scares me to think that there could potentially be a cyclist on Dairy Road. That's kind of the epitome of ignorance, really, But it's just a reality at this particular point. So for the committee, the implementation committee or the subcommittee or whatever whatever it's called, what is the next step? Where do we take this?
Yeah, sure.
We're going to be working with Sandra, myself, and David and Chris to essentially transition the project to the subcommittee. We're going to have 2 workshops in late August to essentially pass the reins over to them, and then they're going to be driving the agenda. But essentially, we see them kind of focusing on, one, looking at the plan and prioritizing, some of the improvements to a manageable list of short-term tasks that they'll have responsibility for. And then we'd like to think that the committee would start, liaisoning with the council and with community stakeholders and start developing support for those specific improvements and informing the community of the broader vision. So they'll be doing community outreach work. And then finally, working with the council and with the state DOT to develop these different funding sources. One would obviously be the traditional funding sources like county CIP and state CIP, but also alternative funding sources like the Safe Routes to School funding, or working with the council to see if there may be opportunities for dedicated sources of funding. So that will really be their primary responsibility, and I think one of their key challenges will be to get people energized around the vision while also, I guess, tempering their enthusiasm to a point where they understand that this is going to be a long-term process. That we're not talking about, a 5-year revolution in walking and biking in Central Maui. This is, what are we going to look like in 20 years? It's going to be an incremental kind of system of improvements, and if we can just get the infrastructure in place, the funding, sources and the vision kind of acceptance by the community, then we'll get there.
Sometimes the longer you wait, the less interest there is. So because the longer you wait, you might not be here. Right. And the people who are really the drivers will not be here. So it is a long-term vision. But I think implementation in steps, I think, is more adequate than just waiting, right. Because you're not going to satisfy everybody, right? I'm still concerned because I'm hoping that the whole thrust is to take the whole bike lane idea away from where we're at today, because it's just, it just cannot work. And I don't know what the cost factors are involved, but hopefully the committee will start to take a look at that, come up with their priorities so there is a little more consistency in how we're addressing the routes, etc. But long overdue, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mateo.
Could I comment on one thing that Chairman Mateo said?
Sure.
You talked about Dairy Road. Now, Dairy Road is a really good example. Because of the priorities in terms of infrastructure development, the airport bypass road wasn't built and still hasn't been built, and supposedly this year or next year it'll start. But the point is that the development, progresses, and there's a lot more traffic on Dairy Road than probably should be. And at some point, when the bypass gets built, there'll probably be kind of a roadway diet. In other words, a cutting back of the emphasis on automobile traffic to more of a balance, so that there could be more pedestrian and bicycle amenities along Dairy Road. But that's a process of kind of evolution that has to take place.
Yeah, I kind of differ in thinking that as this community continue to grow, there is this tremendous love affair with the automobile.
Yeah,
It's not going to go away anytime soon. So, I don't know how effective it is in looking towards that consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mateo. Mr. Carroll, did you have comments, questions?
Thank you, Chair. My comments are a little bit on the negative side. We have so many roads over here. We have the bike tours coming down from Haleakala. We have people doing these bike tours, special, not daily, but setting up bike tours coming to Hana. And I've never seen such a dangerous situation as I see when I drive in and out of Hana with bikes on the road. Bicycles shouldn't be on the road in Hana. Now, I know everybody's going to get upset about that. Well, bikes have the same rights and everything else, but I'm sorry. It's a hugely dangerous situation. And I think that the committee should be looking at some areas, perhaps to where it, if not outlawed, it should be discouraged. And the biking community should be aware and inform people, hey, if you go to Hana, it's dangerous. Somebody could get killed. And I think we have to look at the really dangerous areas and address that too. That could be done more or less immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. And I share the same concerns in my area, in Honolulu. You get people like Lance Armstrong. I mean, these are the professional bikers of the world that come here to train, and they love our island to run around on. And yet, they're in areas such as Hana, in northwest West Maui, and it is dangerous. So there are those concerns, but I know we're addressing Central Maui today. So thank you, and Mr. Couch.
Thank you. And I wanted to kind of reiterate what Chair Mateo said and hopefully steer the committee into thinking this way. I think a 5-year plan is much better than stretching it out in 20 years. I mean, the cost, if they're even close to being accurate, there's about $5 or $6 million to do the whole thing. If you could do that in 5 years, that would give everybody a chance to see how it works, to make it work in Central Maui. Then we can put it out. But to make it a 20-year plan, I think, as Mr. Mateo says, you may not be there. The energy may not be there. But if you see something in 5 years and take a look at it and say, wow, this really works, and that will open the eyes of everybody else. I mean, I'm getting comments. Everybody said the roundabout wasn't going to work in Guille, and that bike path wasn't going to work, and now it's used all the time, and people are already asking me, where's the next one going to be? So I think the sooner the better, as opposed to trying to stretch it out 20 years. And if it's more than $5 million, whatever we can get from the feds, if we can get 80%, that would be really good. And just let's move on this if we can, but be able to communicate with you got to really communicate with the residents first. But I would discourage a 20-year plan. I would rather encourage a 5-year plan on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Couch. Yes, you had a comment, Mr. Cerrito? Okay.
Just related to what you're saying, Don. If we had demonstration areas similar to the roundabout in Kihei, where we picked a key area in Kahului and renovated it to these standards, and just to see what people could expect and to break people's public perception as to the improvements similar to the roundabout, I think the reaction might be better in terms of incrementally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Hokama.
I still think we got to get down to a better educational outreach, Chair. Like I've stated about bad drivers, we get bad bicyclists too. Okay. I mean, I've sat in this chamber and dealt with enough litigation because of bicyclists coming down our state and county roads. Okay. Because I think you mentioned it right. There's also degrees of proficiency of the cyclists on the road. Okay? And this is one sport or activity. You can even have 7-year-olds riding the bike on the active roads, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds. What is their proficiency and ability to deal with semi trucks moving 45 miles an hour with that vacuum on the side of them. Okay, there's a lot of things going on, and we need better parameters on who we're going to allow into certain situations. It's not the 60s no more. It's not the 50s no more. Okay? Life was very different then. Our attitudes are different now. I mean, when you get parents taking kids doing cell phones and texting, tells you something about the parent itself in a school zone. Now we're talking about connecting communities and having it on highways and whatnot. You know, we're gonna let 5-year-old kids ride bicycles on those bike paths? Where is the common sense? This has to be more than just a pilot project or something. This got to be well thought out, because I've sat in too many litigation and claim requests because the county is somehow involved and we've got big pockets. So we better think this out very well and work it from a comprehensive approach here, because I'm not willing to pay for things that we shouldn't be paying for down the road. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hokama. Yeah, and I hear your concerns, and yeah, that's why I brought this to the table, but definitely very in-depth, comprehensive discussion is needed, and of course, outreach. Ms. McGinnis?
Talk a little bit about NPAC's function. One of our functions is to seek outside funding for things like education, and we actually were trying to put together a grant to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, but we didn't get past the first go round. But a lot of that would be to bring consultants back and to do an educational campaign. Another grant would provide bike education in the schools again, in the elementary schools. That was an active program for a number of years and it's dropped off, so we would want to reinstate that. But we did receive $200,000 from a federal Recovery Act grant, which we utilized in 2 years, and we're continuously looking for more funding to bring into the county to do the outreach and some of the charrettes and the community work that we know needs to be done.
Thank you, Ms. McGinnis. And I also concur with Mr. Couch and Mr. Mateo's concern. I see this not as a really huge, high cost idea in the countywide sense, and 20 years out seems to be stretching it out for me too. So that's why I brought it up. And again, I think we can implement this a lot quicker than your 20-year plan, and I'm sure that's good news to you folks. The sooner the better. And with that, members, do we have more discussion, questions, comments? If not, then I want to thank everybody who attended here today for their time, energy, and effort. It's definitely appreciated. And with that, members, without objection, I will defer this item. Thank you, members. So ordered. And at this point, with no further business scheduled, we shall now adjourn the meeting. Meeting is adjourned.